Hey guys, First Regardsman here, and so we'll be talking about classes in Space Marine 2, and more importantly, which one suits your playstyle best and what you should start leveling first. In this video, we're going to go over every single class the game currently has to offer to give a general overview of their strengths, weaknesses, and overall playstyles to give new or returning players a better idea of what they want to main. There are currently 7 classes in Space Marine 2. Now, the Techmarine is not available for everyone just yet as of when I am making this video, but it will be very soon and might already be by the time you're watching this. So how do the classes in this game actually play? Well, the first one we're going to talk about is the Tactical class. Tactical is the premier range support class of Space Marine 2, able to dish out tremendous amounts of single target range damage with weapons like the Stalker Bolt Rifle and Mass Horde Clear, as well with the Melter Rifle or Pyre Blaster. In fact, the Tactical's range weapon selection is the largest in the entire game, with a pretty heavy focus on bolter weapons, and you're also able to hugely buff your team's damage output with his signature class ability, the Auspex Scan. This will fire out a targeted scan area that will mark enemies, making them take more damage from both you and your teammates. This class ability is probably the single most powerful in-game currently, as it really is the ultimate enabler for your entire team's DPS to dish out a ridiculous amount of burst damage against high-threat enemies like bosses. Tactical really is the greatest ally any team comp can ask for, with perks that will regenerate equipment for your entire squad and being able to nuke down some of the more annoying enemies in the game like Zoanthropes all on his own. The major thing this class struggles with is survivability, however, as he is the definition of a glass cannon and does have a bit of a learning curve compared to some of the other classes we'll get into later, but when played properly, he is still one of the best classes in the entire game. So if massive range damage and support perks are your thing, Tactical will likely fit your playstyle perfectly, and he's a pretty well designed class overall. The next class we're going to cover here is Assault. The Assault class is a highly mobile, incredibly damaging melee class that truly shines when it comes to massive enemy clumps and enormous amounts of burst damage on top of armor regen. This class has gone through a serious redemption arc over the game's lifespan, since during the initial launch of Space Marine 2, he was by far the most undercooked class, but over a year later, with multiple new weapons and major balance changes, the Assault is a very powerful class, albeit a bit harder to play for some players. Your signature move is the Ground Pound, which has you launch into the air with your jump pack, only to crater back to the earth to deal huge area damage and stagger stronger enemies that survive. The Assault's ability to wipe out massive hordes with staggering amounts of melee damage and dish out the highest gunstrike damage in the game can almost trivialize certain encounters, but he's not without some major downsides. This class has access to the majority of melee weapons in the game, such as the Power Axe or the Power Sword and the incredibly popular Thunder Hammer, though unlike most other classes, the Assault only has access to a secondary range weapon, which does make him struggle more versus certain enemies that other classes or other range classes would be able to body. The reason this class can be a bit hard to pick up initially is that he does require you to understand more of the game's melee and armor mechanics, and what situations are worth ground pounding into and which ones will just straight up get you killed. Though if you do master the Assault, he is one of the most dominant classes in the current state of the game. He's also one of the most fun to play in general. The next class we're going to talk about here is the Vanguard. Vanguard functions as far more of a hybrid class, having access to a primary, secondary, and melee weapon with a slightly greater focus on melee combat. Your signature class ability is the Grapnel Hook, allowing you to lash onto enemies and pull yourself directly into melee combat against large hordes, or catching out annoying enemy ranged units like Devourers. This can even be used to make some strategic exits, though the grapnel targeting does leave a lot to be desired and can get you killed at times. One of the greatest draws of the Vanguard class is that he has access to both self and team healing in his perk tree, alongside more popular ranged weapons like the Melter Rifle. And while he may not be as damaging in melee as a class like Assault, he makes up for this by being able to survive off very few pickups and being less susceptible to chip damage from enemy range fire, thanks to a plethora of damage reduction perks on top of his heals. All of this makes him an excellent class for newer players, as being able to heal from enemy damage and having more AoE based stagger weapons like the Melter Rifle I previously mentioned will help a lot of people learn the game when they are just starting out. The Vanguard only particularly struggles with burst damage, as currently only his Execute build can do dramatic horde clear damage, but that being said, he's more than capable of tackling harder content like hard stratagems, and his team perks are great for support regardless. So if pulling yourself into the enemy horde and surviving in a war of attrition sounds like your thing, you should probably try out the Vanguard class. The next class is one of, if not the strongest class in the entirety of Space Marine 2, which is the Bulwark. The Bulwark is the tank support melee class of Space Marine 2, boasting a ridiculous amount of damage reduction and increased starting HP on top of some of the strongest melee weapons the game has, like the Power Fist. Your class ability, the Chapter Banner, puts down a choke point for your team that will regenerate armor for you and your allies, on top of being able to deal AoE damage with the proper perk selection. So you might be thinking that because of all of his damage reduction and increased HP, the Bulwark must struggle with dealing damage, right? Well, not really. This class actually puts out a ridiculous amount of damage as well, thanks to his damage on parry perks and prestige perks that give him even more damage increases, on top of access to the two best melee weapons in the game. And on top of all of this, he also has a shield that he can block 100% of incoming range damage with, even while he is moving, on top of a shield rush attack to stagger enemies and the ability to heal himself and his teammates to full HP with his banner. Bulwark really is just that guy and is an incredible class for new players, similar to Vanguard, and is one of the most popular classes in the game for this reason. The only downside to Bulwark is that, like the Assault class, he doesn't have a proper primary weapon and is instead limited to melee and a secondary exclusively, but to be honest, this doesn't really hurt him as much as you'd think, since defending against enemy range attacks is quite easy thanks to your shield, and overall, this guy is just kind of on crack. So if holding the line and carrying the gene seed for your brothers while you cave in Tyranid skulls sounds enticing to you, then the Bulwark is probably the best class choice you could make. This brings us to the Sniper class. Now, Sniper is a long-range single-target damage dealer in Space Marine 2, if a class name didn't make that obvious, boasting a major focus on burst range damage and also shockingly high melee damage. Your class ability is the Camo Cloak, allowing you to temporarily go invisible to gain damage bonuses for either your ranged or melee attacks that can even let you outright one-shot certain powerful enemies in the game. The intended gameplay loop of the Sniper will have you going in and out of stealth throughout the entire mission to set up equipment like melt-a-bombs in strategic locations, and to regain your contested health, as the Sniper with the proper perk selection is shockingly good at survival. He has multiple unique range weapons like the Bolt Sniper Rifle and the Last Fusel, which are not only fun to use but incredibly effective, though results may vary depending on your aim, with the Bolt Sniper Rifle being one of the higher skill cap weapons in the entirety of Space Marine 2. His melee weapon selection is far more limited, as you are permanently stuck to only a combat knife, but this is really all you need, as the Shadow Stab single target ability on this thing fits the Sniper playstyle perfectly. The major downside of the Sniper is that his horde clear is a bit lacking unless you use his equipment regen with a melt-a-bomb, as on his own he doesn't have an immediate answer to a swarm of enemies in his face. But that's really by design, because after all, he is intended to be a single target damage class, not a walking AoE apocalypse, though he can definitely fill that role with melt-a-bomb spam and the Pattern of Excellence perk. But if sniper rifles and a general focus on single target burst damage sounds like your cup of tea, then you will probably love the Sniper class, and your team will thank you, because it is unlikely they will ever have to deal with a zoanthrope again if you are actually on point. Now, the next class we'll be talking about here is the Heavy. This class can be summed up as you shoot gun and have big armor to make sure you are able to keep shooting gun. When you can no longer shoot gun, you're gonna have a bad time. Where other classes like Vanguard and Tactical can swap between melee and range, the Heavy is almost exclusively a range class, having access to 0 melee weapons and some of the heaviest hitting primaries the game has on offer. Your class ability, the Iron Halo, deploys a mobile shield in front of you that follows your movements to absorb range damage until it is either depleted on its own or gets shattered by enemy fire. It is hard to properly describe with words the level of DACA achieved by the Heavy class. Weapons like the Heavy Bolter are able to shred through chaos and Tyranid swarms alike, and things like the Heavy Plasma Incinerator make you question if the enemy even existed to begin with. Now, having a big gun is great and all, but what about second gun? What about tiny gun? Well, we also have access to the majority of tiny guns, also known as secondaries, in the game. However, the major drawback of this class is that you have no access to melee weapons at all, and you only have your massive Gravis armored foot. And don't get me wrong, the foot is quite powerful and one of the best tools for getting rid of Minoris, but running out of ammo can be incredibly detrimental for this class, even with your ammo regen loadout. Though on top of being a massive range damage dealer, the Heavy can also be an incredibly tanky class, second only to the Bulwark, thanks to access to perks like Fortitude, Conviction, and Encompassing Aegis. So if a heavily armored range playstyle is what you were looking for out of Space Marine 2, this is by far the best pick. As for the next and final class, it is time for us to finally talk about the Techmarine. This is Space Marine 2's only post-launch class added so far and boasts a very unique playstyle. Your class ability is called the Servo Gun, gun that functions as an AI-controlled shoulder-mounted cannon that targets enemies to blow them apart or light them on fire, with multiple variations such as a plasma incinerator version or a more sniper-focused precision shot variant. The most unique feature of the Techmarine, however, is that he can gunstrike without going into an animation by firing his servo gun instead. This is incredibly useful and helps you not only deal extra damage against Majoris and higher enemies, but also just pick up free armor against Minoris you've knocked down while ripping through the swarm. The Techmarine also has access to many of the same ranged weapons as tactical, such as the bolt rifle and plasma incinerator, alongside some of the strongest melee weapons in the game, like the power axe. Not to mention his very own unique melee weapon, the Omniscient axe, that lets him charge into battle with range damage reduction and skewer enemies before dispensing massive electrical explosions. This class also has access to the Tarantula sentry guns, which will spawn throughout your operations while you're playing as the Techmarine, allowing you to activate them to help you defend key areas and have a fallback point for boss fights and other encounters. The major downside of the Techmarine is that you are a glass cannon with very little resistance to getting staggered, which does make him one of the hardest classes to play in the game currently, though many of his features are also automated, which is easier in some ways than other classes the game currently offers. He is, however, a new class, so some growing pains are to be expected, and his overall playstyle is incredibly fun, and he is likely to get many positive changes, like every other class in this game since launch. So if praising the Omniscient and ripping apart Tyranids and Thousand Suns with your mechanical arm sounds appealing, this is the only class for you. Now, I know the Techmarine is not officially out just yet, and he is only available on the PC version of the game, but he will be available to all players in a few weeks, so console players will not be missing out for too long. But that is every class currently available in Space Marine 2. Hopefully this gave you a better idea of which class you want to main if you're just starting out, or what class you want to focus on next if you are currently in the process of leveling. Let me know what class is your favorite in the comments below, and if you want to ask me questions about the game or just come hang out, you can find me live here on YouTube or on Twitch with a link in the video description alongside a link to my community Discord. I will be streaming the new Techmarine update on its official launch soon, so if you like content like this, subscribe for more, and as always guys, thanks for watching, take it easy, bye.